Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of AI Inside, the show where we take a look at the AI that is layered throughout the world of technology. Ology. I'm one of your hosts, Jason Howell, joined by my friend and co-host Jeff Jarvis. Good to see
Okay,
you,
so
Jeff.
now we got to buy you an echo chamber box.
I mean, I've got plenty of audio gear here. I should just be able to hook up like a
Oh
delay
yeah,
panel
I think you got to
to
play with
us
this.
and at just the right time. Anytime we say superintelligence today, I'm going to kick in a delay effect just to like punctuate. Also, big time hello and hat nod to Daniel Croft, who is here for the live recording. By the way, you can join us for the live recording. It's AI Inside Show on YouTube. We live stream most of our episodes, except for interview episodes, which we do have some interview episodes coming up this Sunday, next Sunday, and we're going to talk a little bit about this Sunday's interview episode a little bit later. We'll play you a clip and kind of set up what it's all about. Very fascinating conversation. Before we get there, though, we got a lot of news to talk about.
Oh,
and some
do we?
really interesting news. I guess we say that every single week, but it's true every single week. And this time around, I don't know, this first block of news is all about copyright, and there was a ton of stories that fall into that bucket. Let's start with Cloudflare, who launched a marketplace for publisher control over AI crawlers that are hitting sites. Cloudflare has so much, like, touches so much of the web. So many sites are channeling their traffic through Cloudflare servers for protection, for all sorts of things. And so Cloudflare, on kind of like a network level, is rolling out new tools that give its users control over what kinds of AI bots actually have access to the data of their clients. There's also some tools to monetize that access. Users can block AI bots wholesale from crawling their data. That's actually on by default. And then can also integrate a pay per crawl system that sets different action types up with different monetization approaches. So you've got granular controls. You can whitelist certain crawlers. You can have different settings for different aspects of AI training or fine tuning or inference, all that kind of stuff. And we'll stop there for just a second, because I'm curious to hear what you think, Jeff, as far as this being a potential kind of solution. I'm guessing we're going to see more of this from other players in the industry. What do you think?
So one thing I've been struggling with is to understand whether, and we talked about this a little bit last week, whether just to use our old terminology, a robots.txt is legally enforceable.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Right? Is it just a courtesy? Or if I come in and violate that or violate terms of service or whatever, can I be taken to court? Can I be found liable? Is my acquisition of the information invalid? And on the other side of it, if I'm a site, can I, pardon me, restrict it in odd ways? Can I say that only the people with white hair cannot use this site? Can I discriminate on some basis? I don't know where that comes out in terms of the legal piece first. So I have no idea what the answer to that is. But then Cloudflare came out, and this was kind of a two-part announcement. The first part was, we're going to protect you sites from this crawling. Now, technically, I'm not sure exactly how they do that. But then the second part of it was, okay, let's start a paywall here. Let's start a toll booth. And I think it's interesting, but I'm troubled back on the earlier questions then. Is that what if I say, Google follows robots.txt, and that's the choice they make. But if I wanted to start something that was, let's say, an academic exercise to see what's happening on the web, good or bad or whatever, and I don't care about the robots.txt, I want to study that. And if you, Jason, can go read a site, but I, academic, can't read the same site, reading in my terms being crawling, what are the opportunities for discrimination there? What are the issues of inequality there? Does it become just that the rich get richer only if you have authority and have power? So there are larger questions here. Money, right? Also nationality. Gee, I don't like the French. The French can't come in here, but the Germans can. What's proper? We need a discussion of the ethics here. And then I warned you that I have a little bit of a riff here because I was playing with something this week. I'm trying to use the AI more. You've been good about that. I haven't been, so I'm trying to use it more. And I'm working on a next book. I handed in my hot type linotype book, so we'll see how that goes. But
Nice.
I'm working on the next one, and I asked AI to explain some simple things to me. Like I won't even go into the context, but I never understood how vacuum tubes worked. The most fundamental electronic era functionality of an amplifier. And I didn't grok it. I just never tried to. So I went into AI. I looked at videos on YouTube, and I went into AI, had it try to explain it to me, and it did a pretty good job. And then I had another topic. I won't bore you with what the topic was, but I had another topic that was a little deeper. And I went to, for some reason, I don't know how, I'm on Google Pro 2.5 Gemini. So I went into the deep research, 2.5 Gemini, deep research. And I asked a question, and I threw in too much. I said, is this the most important innovation in? And then it wanted to go look at every other innovation there was at the same time. And it went on and on and on and on. And then finally it just
Too
crapped
wide
out.
of scope.
It stopped.
Something like
yeah,
that.
and it crapped out. So I tried again, and it was doing the same thing where it's just doing, I'm showing you everything I'm doing. Aren't you proud of me? Look at me do this. Look at me do that. But it's going through 1,000 sites. And it's going to give me links to those sites. And so I'm thinking, whoa, great. It saves me a little effort just to find sources, right? We talked, I think 2 weeks ago about somebody who was using Perplexity in this way. They use Perplexity to get the sites, and they use Notebook LM to store and analyze them. So it finally came through, and it gave me something that was not bad. But the sites were crap. The sources that it used were things like sample papers for paper mills, syllabi for courses, people who just write these, kind of 1.5 page websites. I'm going to explain the entire history of blank to you, right? And it didn't do a bad job in the end, but it did that over the handicap of our web today. And our web today is filled with not only AI slop, even before that, lots of clickbait crap, advertisements for things like college paper mills and so on and so forth. And so I got disturbed because Gemini could only do so much given the sources, given what it could crawl. Back finally to the point. Given what it could freely crawl on the web, it did a pretty good job. But then I imagined, what if we could set loose Gemini on the New York Public Library with no limitations? It would be 100,000 times better. It would be using creditable sources. It would have more information. It would have a better sense of what's there and why. It would have a sense of citation. It would have the benefits. Or what if we put it loose on academic papers or on book publishers or on good sources? So, yes, we need to figure out part of the discussion we had last week about the copyright case with not Audacity, with Anthropic. Where the judge said, when you acquired it legally, yes, it's fair use. And we're going to get to another case in a few minutes where the opposite is said. But in the Anthropic case, but when you didn't acquire it legally, then no, you're out of bounds. I think we need a larger discussion as a society now about if we're going to be using AI, and we are. It's horses out of the barn, over the horizon, and in a glue factory. There's no going back here. We're going to be using AI. What do we want as a society then about the quality of that? And how do we come up with arrangements for this? If we need a Cloudflare pay gate, okay, that's a discussion to have, but I'd rather have the discussion in a rather open way. We need discussion in courts, we need discussion in policy, we need discussion in business. But in the end of the day, if our kids are going to be educating themselves with these chatbots, and they already are.
And they are, yeah.
Right? They already are.
Indeed, they are, yes.
So if we keep on thinking, oh, how clever we are, we're cutting off all these sources to these evil AI companies. Okay, I get that. But what's the downstream impact of that?
Yeah.
So the Cloudflare thing, sorry for this long Jarvis soliloquy, but the Cloudflare thing may be good news in the sense that it sets up a safe position where, as in the Anthropic case, you can say, hey, we had a deal. We went and did it. We followed their rules. We did whatever. We paid them or whatever it might be. Or the effect could be that these models are going to feed on ever worse crap and more of their own
Diluted,
entrails. And
limited.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And more manipulable because I'll just put up free crap on the web. I'll
Right.
use AI.
I will put up that crap and I will keep it open. And there's probably some way to game the system on the other side of that when you're talking about spam and people that have something to gain from the models having access to their specific brand of crap.
Right.
And yeah, that'll be
So
interesting.
that's what got me going. And the rest of the stories are going to follow out from this. But that's, to me, the context of how we want to judge what we make available to the public as a whole and thus to AI.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I think the upside to something like this is that the publishers who have long, and by long I mean in the last couple of years that any of this has been happening to at the degree that it is, have wanted to have some sort of semblance of control over their content, have wanted to have some sort of mechanism or consistency around compensation. So on its face, this gives them a piece of that. And who knows what that compensation actually might look like, the pay-per-crawl system. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, what kind of money are we talking about? What are the numbers exactly? We don't really know yet. And I'm curious, very curious about that. But then there's the downside, which is, like you said, parts of the web inevitably end up closed off because there are the never AIers who are like, no, no matter what, this will not stand. The suppression will not stand. And, it'll be siphoned off. And then that limits the research, that limits the archival, that limits the quality of the AI models themselves. And yeah, like you said, kids are using. And when I say kids, I realize, like, yes, some kids are like legitimate kids are using these things for education. But I think more than that, you've got the 20 to 30-year-old workers who are largely investing a lot of their reliance on these tools because it's the now thing, and it's because it does have a lot of potential. And so are we setting them up for failure to a large degree by doing that?
Yeah, and it's a larger ethical society discussion. And I'm reminded of Aaron Swartz, may he rest in peace, who saw this back in, I don't know what year it was when he tragically died, but when he was trying to download JSTOR, arguing that an academic resource like that should be an open academic resource for the good of society. And this is just the internet. This is before AI. This is before all that. That was just to say for students and researchers should have access to this. And right now I work for 2 universities and I'm emeritus at one, and that gives me access to libraries that I'm scared to death I'm going to lose because I wouldn't be able to write my books. I wouldn't be able to do what I do because I have a privileged access to this stuff. And it ended up with a court case against Aaron Swartz, and he committed suicide as a result. And it's a tragic loss all around. And so, but he was trying to cause this discussion to happen. And I think we need to have it at a higher level. So.
Well, there's a lot more that feeds into this, of course. Another story is about Creative Commons launching CC Signals, which is its new framework meant to guide how data sets can be used in AI development. So I think the goal here is seeking to find balance between the openness of the internet and also the kind of increasing demand for data to train AI models with. And we've seen Creative Commons be a pretty impactful for the creator kind of content community, let's say, as far as putting out with your content a license of sorts that says this is what I allow for, this is what I don't allow for. So in this case, applying that to the idea around applying similar principles to the AI ecosystem. Essentially, data holders can specify if and how their content is reused by machines. So in some ways, this is similar but a different approach to what we were just talking about. Legal as well as technical tools, similar to how they do those existing licenses in other ways with Creative Commons. And this is in a public feedback kind of period ahead of an alpha launch that's expected for November 2025.
I got invited to a meeting on this, and unfortunately I couldn't attend. So I'm eager to follow where this goes. And I think it's, I prefer this for now to the Cloudflare, though I haven't studied them both that well, just because it doesn't yet have the paywall up. And it's just trying to set these structures. But once again, what if I say in a discriminatory fashion that through the Creative Commons signals that I'm limiting it in some way that I think is harmful? A discussion we need to have. The other one out there. So I went to a meeting of Common Crawl, and we had the head of Common Crawl on our first show, as I remember. And it was an event in New York 2 weeks ago, and they were talking a lot about Croissant, which is a standard for metadata around this kind of data when you pull it up. And that's as much as I know, and I probably even screwed that up. But the point is that there's an equal ethical obligation on the crawler and on the model maker to be transparent. We talked about this, I think, last week. Right now, they're motivated not to be transparent, because who knows is going to sue me for the fact that I read your stuff, right? So we've got to come to understandings here where you can interrogate what went into a model and understand that better. And I think that's an equally important ethical decision to be made on that side. I think we have to be more open on the supply side, and we have to be more transparent on the demand side.
Interesting stuff. And then on the side of this, because I said this whole first thing is all copyright, then we have a bunch of legal kind of stories. So that's all about kind of like the machinery that's being set up to help aid in all of this. And then we got a number of cases that are kind of litigating this in court. A new one here, which is a group of authors suing Microsoft in New York federal court. They allege the company used nearly 200,000 pirated digital books without consent. That was to train its Megatron AI model. That sounds pretty darn familiar with the Anthropic case that we were talking about just last week.
So Mike Masnick did a great job, as he does, comparing these two. And these two decisions, the Anthropic case and the Microsoft case, came out of the same building within a very short time of each other. To recap, the Anthropic case said, once again, if you acquired it legally and you use it for training, that's fair use and transformative. The Microsoft case, on the other hand, said that the authors didn't make an appropriate argument. And I'm not exactly sure, because I haven't read the whole case, of exactly what he meant by that. But he then said, but if you had, this wouldn't be fair use. So it was completely contradictory decisions at the district court level, out of the same district, at the same time. So of course that means that's going to have to go up through appellate and into the Supreme Court, surely. So in a sense, what Mike Masnick said was, in a sense, the Microsoft decision was a victory for, I'm going to get this right here, was a victory for Meta, but could really backfire on them. Whereas the Anthropic decision, no, I'm screwing that up. I can't, Mike gave a nice parallel here. But the only point is they're fully contradictory. And, and so the only way to come through is more cases and more layers of courts. So we can't know anything right now. I think it has been interesting, though, that even though the Microsoft case was not friendly to fair use, it still got thrown out. It still said there's a bar to go here, and it's difficult. So.
Yeah, Masnick wrote, quote, "We're watching judges fixate on their personal bugbears rather than grappling with the fundamental questions about how copyright should work in the age of AI," which is, is illustrated by the fact that these are two judges very similar cases, very opposite kind of perspectives
Yeah.
on what this means for fair use, coming out of the same
building,
same building,
almost at the same time.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, interesting stuff. I love Mike's analysis and his
He's
work.
the best.
So
He actually reads the cases and knows what he's doing.
and understands them very, very well. And then we also have another case, which is U.S. District Judge Vince Chabry saying, let's see here, this has to do with Meta. 13 authors, including comedian Sarah Silverman, which we've talked about this case many times, is essentially dismissed the case in that copyright infringement lawsuit against Meta. The judge said the authors, quote, made the wrong arguments and failed to develop a record in support of the right one. So Chabry,
I messed up here. That's Meta that I was talking about, not Microsoft.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, because I was trying to. Okay,
I completely
that
messed that
makes
up.
sense.
I apologize.
No, that's all right. I was like, oh, wait a minute. They have to do with that one
No,
too.
that's Meta. That's what. Yeah. So sorry.
There we go.
This is
No,
so
that
confusing.
makes more sense. Yeah, it's just a lot all at once. Everything everywhere all at once. Chabry said the ruling was narrowly applied to these 13 authors who filed the case and does not mean that Meta's use of copyright materials was lawful. So, and also just kind of went a step further and did criticize Alsup, who was also in the building, in a entirely different case, completely. Saying Alsup focused heavily on the transformative nature of generative AI while brushing aside concerns about the harm it can inflict on the market for the works it gets trained on.
So let me recap here since I screwed up. The Microsoft story is a new suit by a bunch of authors against Microsoft.
Yes,
The
a new suit,
Anthropic
yes.
is one of the two that came out of San Francisco, which said that if acquired properly, training is fair use. And the Meta is one that threw out the case by the authors, including Sarah Silverman, but said that if you file it properly, I'm going to smile at your anti-fair use case.
Totally. Basically,
Sorry
like
about
you
that,
did this
folks.
wrong,
My
but
screw
please
up.
bring it back because I bet you'll get it right. You'll win on the opposite side.
So I
And then-
apologize for that.
Oh, good. Oh, good. And then we have one final case, which doesn't really have a whole lot to do about kind of fair use on its face anyways. I mean, maybe it did at some point, but the reason that it's getting dropped doesn't necessarily. Getty Images dropped its primary copyright infringement claims against Stability AI. This happened in the UK, and like I said, it's a little different because it's driven less by the actual merits of copyright law here, more by challenges over jurisdiction, because Getty was struggling to find a direct link between Stability's infringing acts or alleged infringing acts, training with Getty Images, and UK territory. Most of the training occurred on US servers, not in the UK. So the case really focuses then on whether the import and use of AI models trained overseas or abroad constitutes infringement in the UK. So it's a little bit different, but nonetheless, kind of plays
Right,
into
and it will continue in a way that I don't fully understand, but Getty dropped their parts of it, but is maintaining other parts of this case. So there's going to be just tons of this. If you want to go to law school, kids, study copyright.
Yeah, no kidding.
Maybe don't get a CS degree. Now law degrees may come into popularity again.
That'll keep you busy for quite a while. Yeah. So interesting stuff there. A whole collection of copyright, and I'm sure there will be more to come. Real quick, want to throw out a big thank you to our patrons, patreon.com/AI Inside Show. If you support us on Patreon, you are supporting the production of this show on a weekly and monthly basis. We really do get so much of our ability to continue doing this from you, our patrons. So thank you for that. Thank you to DJ Route, who has been very active and very present, and I really appreciate, we really appreciate DJ's support in the Patreon. Patreon.com/AI Inside Show. All right, we're going to take a quick break and then come back and talk about, well, I guess we got to talk about the big bill that Trump's big tax bill that has nothing to do with AI now. That's coming up in a second. Okay, so I'm curious about your perspective on this because I don't follow Washington D.C. and politics super closely. It just kind of gives me a headache and makes me angry, which is maybe why I should pay closer attention to it. But anyways, I digress. The U.S. Senate voted 99-1. So pretty, about as decisively as you can get without being all in, against a 10-year ban, what started as a 10-year ban on states enacting their own AI regulations. This was to be included in Trump's major tax and spending bill that was, ultimately passed through the Senate, I think yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. The bill did pass the Senate. This particular provision was stripped away. They tried to get it down to a 5-year ban, and ultimately they just had to let it go. And my understanding about this is that big tech was largely supported this provision. They wanted to avoid kind of a patchwork of state regulations around AI, which can be a lot more complicated, I suppose, for them to manage their businesses if there are all sorts of different regulations on a state level. The majority Senate felt that states should retain that ability to safeguard their residents related to AI. And so there you go. It was soundly rejected.
So this seemed to be flying through.
Yeah, it did until the last minute.
And then
brace yourselves, it's going to happen, and then nope.
It became kind of a pissing match between Marsha Blackburn and Ted Cruz. Blackburn was she wanted to scrap this provision. She wanted to be able to regulate because she wanted to maintain her, Tennessee's Elvis Act that prohibits non-consensual use of AI to mimic musicians' voices, quoting Bloomberg. Ted Cruz expressed frustration that he'd brokered a deal with Blackburn to keep the limited measure in there, but it collapsed, and he ultimately voted to strip it. The concern here, and I talked to one technologist who said, this has to go, this has to pass. This is so important to the future of AI because otherwise they're going to be dealing with a patchwork of regulation, different state to state to state. That's going to be hell, and God knows what stupid laws we passed. And there's a point there. Though the question is, will we have any sensible federal regime of regulation of AI? God knows. So it was very much, this ban was very much the child of the AI companies. On the one hand, they're out there saying, oh, regulate us, it's okay.
Right.
In this case, they said, no, you don't regulate us. But I found it interesting, Adam Thierer.
Regulate us, but don't regulate us like that.
Right. Let me write it, not you.
Yeah. Right.
So Adam Thierer, who's a libertarian policy guy in Washington, and a good guy I like, said, I didn't mean to make that a but. He's a libertarian, and I like him. But he had a post, which Jason is showing you in dark mode, which
you know it,
which goes into the problems. And he said that California and New York will now take the lead in shaping national AI policy. So basically, it's an abrogation of policy from the federal government to the states, and we'll see whether these states agree. He argues that it's going to be a devastating blow for little tech AI players because in a classic case of regulatory capture, only the big guys will be able to afford to accede to whatever the regulation is that these states come up with. And he says that it marks a major setback for America's efforts to have a coherent pro-innovation, pro-investment policy regarding AI in opposition to China. And in fact, it's a story that I saw this week that it's not in the rundown, but just really quickly, that said that China is really hitting us hard now, not just DeepSeek, but other companies. And that this is an all-out competition. And Thier's argument is that the more we regulate, this is a classic libertarian argument, the less innovation we're going to have. So this provision seemed a little bit overdone. States can't regulate AI for 10 years flat. Might have been trying too hard. I think if they said we need a moratorium on regulation until we come up with a federal policy, and we're going to fund, as they're going to fund anything these days, a study and direct an agency to propose policy and legislation on AI, that might have gone through. That might have been more defensible, I think. But this 10 years, no state, no nothing, was over the top. So
I mean, think of how much happens in 10 years when you're not considering something as rapidly developing as AI that we've seen what happens in 2 years. I mean, is it the sort of thing in this case, pardon my ignorance about governmental, kind of policy and approach and topics and stuff, but is it the sort of case where they often shoot for the moon and expect to be kind of reined in? You know what I mean? It's like, if I start at 10, then maybe we'll end up at 5. And if that's the case, maybe in this case, starting at 10 ended up being kind of the death knell for it, because like, well, what the hell are you doing? Like,
yeah, I think you're right, because I think that's what Cruz.
It's not sensible.
Cruz and Blackburn are not, in my view, being a little politically remote, the most reasonable people in the world. When I testified before the Senate, Blackburn went after me, and about copyright. I think that they were trying to come up with a more moderate view, but then it just all fell apart. I'm not exactly sure how and why. But you're right. 10 years is a long time. I can't find it right off the bat. Damn it. So the Elon University and here it is, Pew Research Center, in 2014 collected 1,500 responses from experts, plus me, I'm not an expert, on the future of life in 2025. Mm-hmm. So that future has now arrived, and I haven't dug into it yet, but maybe next week we can talk about it. It's interesting. What did we predict 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Versus what's happening now. And I'm quoted once, but I'm quoted only saying, you can't predict.
Which you were right.
Yeah.
If there's one thing I can predict about 10 years from now, it's that I can't predict anything with any sort of accuracy. Just two of them.
So these predictions. Information sharing over the internet will be so effortlessly interwoven into daily life that it will become invisible, flowing like electricity, often through machine intermediaries. The spread of the internet will enhance global connectivity that fosters more planetary relationships and less ignorance.
Oh boy!
I can argue that both ways. Mm-hmm. I can, and I'll stop there. But yeah, 10 years is a. You're really right, Jason. Is a hard scope on which to predict life.
I mean, even when you just look at the internet as a technology, the 10-year intervals, you know what I mean? How long has the internet in the way that we know it now been around since 1994? 96, somewhere around 94, there.
Right.
So we're talking, 30 years.
Yep.
And if you just break that into 3 10-year chunks, I don't know at any point in that continuum we would have been able to make an accurate prediction of what it would be like 10 years later.
As I am fond of saying, it's 1486 in Gutenberg years. If you think of what print was 30 years after, wasn't even beginning to show what it was going to be.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, right. Interesting, fascinating stuff. It's all moot because it's been removed for now.
Yep,
we'll see what happens. Mark Zuckerberg is in love with superintelligence, and so much so Mark Zuckerberg wants to marry superintelligence. He is willing to wine and dine and spend all his hard-earned money to get the AI folks that are going to get the company to superintelligence fast. They announced, as we had talked in a previous episode, maybe last week, I can't remember when it was, that we heard rumors and murmurings about Meta's Superintelligence Lab, MSL for short. It's led by Alexander Wang, who's former CEO of Scale AI, now Chief AI Officer at Meta. Also involved, Nat Friedman, ex-GitHub CEO. And this is, as we have talked about before, this move is really about consolidating Meta's leading AI teams into a single mission of achieving superintelligence, whatever that is that they define it to be, investing hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure, in talent, in acquisitions. Basically, Meta is flexing its mighty money muscle to basically say, we've got the money to attract everyone that's important in AI to bring us to this, so why not do that? And so they've been recruiting from OpenAI, Anthropic, Google. Of course, there's a Wired report that says Meta is paying up to $300 million over 4 years for some of the top talent to come on down and help us with our super intelligence drive. What do you think?
Two things. One, it smells of a bubble.
Yeah, you're right.
Jesus, if you have this much money to throw around, I mean, the 2000 bubble was VC money being used to buy audiences that once you finished buying them, couldn't care less about what you bought them for. and your audience went away. This bubble is entirely different. It doesn't affect the public in any way, but it affects the talent pool for AI. And is this? But it's all at this aimed at this goal of superintelligence, which is, I've said a million times here, BS. And so it's a false goal, I think. And they're fighting among each other. So Sam Altman's really pissed that Zuckerberg keeps coming after his own talent, and he said that the missionaries will beat the mercenaries.
Oh, when you're putting that out there and you're Sam Altman, that's the headline, right? That's what everybody's going to start retweeting.
Some PR guy made some money there. Or ChatGPT. I don't know which one.
True. What does that say about what does that say about the career, the people who are paid to do that? If ChatGPT came up with it, it's like, okay, cool. This looks good.
An OpenAI executive says someone has broken into our house and stolen something.
Yeah.
But the second thing is, it smells of desperation on Zuckerberg's part, I think, doesn't it?
It does.
Right? We got the best. Google is more. We know what we're doing. Look at what we're doing. We're doing good stuff. And here's Meta saying, we don't have the right people. We got to get the right people.
By any means necessary. And I mean, we talked last week about Apple too, kind of potentially doing something similar. Actually, I didn't put it in the rundown this week, but Apple considering similar things, working with testing out Anthropic, testing out ChatGPT to kind of replace some of what, if not most of what Siri is built around, and also considering using their money muscle to buy up something, because they too often, it has been said that Apple's kind of in a desperate spot when it comes to its AI strategy. These are just companies that have massive amounts of money in their war chest, that if they feel like they are behind, and especially in a moment right now where they all seem to agree that you got to be a leader in AI if you want to compete in the future, define the future how you will. And they're willing to spend their money to make that happen. And in this case, it's biting Sam Altman in the butt, because he truly feels he has the right team, and Meta's coming in there, and he says Meta's acting in a way that feels somewhat distasteful. This was from an internal Slack that I think was leaked or whatever. Sam Altman talking internally about the Meta hiring spree. Meta has gotten a few great people for sure, but on the whole, it is hard to overstate how much they didn't get their top people and had to go quite far down the list. Of course, also saying missionaries will beat mercenaries.
So meanwhile, we remember that Zuckerberg paid $14 billion to get Scale, and with it Alexander Wang to be his new guru. Well, Inc. magazine and Futurism summarizing it says that he bought a pig in a poke, that Scale is a clown car, that it flooded with spam. So Scale is an effort to do the grunt work of tagging, categorizing data, right? And so now it says the Scale's clients are identifying a ripoff with all kinds of spammers coming in and working with independent contractors as contributors who have abused the system through lax security and yada, yada, yada. I don't understand all this, but it just smells, once again, of the desperation. Mark hired this kid, and I say that because I'm an old guy with white hair, which is ridiculous of me to say, but he hired Wang to be the god of everything because of what Scale was, and now people are saying Scale's not so hot.
They were hiring basically anyone, even though they had higher requirements for degrees and the things that they were hiring around, and yet anyone could kind of come in, and they just needed bodies. They needed warm bodies to do the large, massive amount of work of, I don't know. I guess in reading this, it was like, I didn't think about the fact that like what Scale actually involved itself in the business. And I only sort of understand, but it's kind of like they were manually adding context to the information that is being fed to these companies. And they needed people to do that, people to add that context, I guess.
So it's Mechanical Turk.
Yes,
Right.
right. You're right.
Essentially, right? Which means you have to have that ground truth if you're going to train the system, and it's going to say, this is a cat. Somebody has to have said, that's a cat. One way or the other, you had to learn it's a cat. Maybe you learn it through captions. Maybe you learn it through this, right? So I'm not exactly sure what it is they're monitoring, and their client list is confidential and so on and so forth. But the other thing is, that seems like a rather rudimentary task. And so I wonder what Wang's bona fides are with Superintelligence AI. A labeling company does not strike me as the essence of high thought on AI. Could be wrong. Maybe I don't understand what scale is, but I'm confused about Zuckerberg's moves of late.
Yeah, interesting. Also, his fashion choice. He needs to get someone to give him different instruction on the shirts that he's picking.
I think so.
Wearing a shirt that says Zuck on it, I probably wouldn't walk around. It's like being in a band and wearing your band shirt to your performance. You don't need to do that.
That's a no. You don't do that.
I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't. But hey, there's a lot of people in this world.
See, I can wear a Stony Brook hat to Stony Brook.
Yeah. Okay. That's true.
That's okay.
Okay. All right. I've dug myself into a hole.
No, maybe not. No, that's I get it. Yeah. You're a cool musician.
I just wanted to criticize him for something that had nothing to do with anything we were talking about. That's all. I just wanted to make fun of Zuckerberg a little bit, that adorable billionaire. Microsoft is developing a new language model to diagnose disease. According to CEO Mustafa Suleyman, it's 4 times more accurate, according to him, than a panel of human physicians. They tested this with 304 case studies pulled from the New England Journal of Medicine. The model broke each case down step by step. Then it took those results and it fed them to Gemini, to ChatGPT, Claude, Llama, Grok, all different directions. And it used those LLMs to mimic a team of, I'll put in air quotes, human experts working together towards a similar goal. And in doing so, they say they've achieved 80% accuracy compared to 20% from a human panel. So there you go. I don't know how deeply to buy in on this, but sounds interesting nonetheless.
2 things about this. One is that a lot of this has to be that the data going in has to be better, which oftentimes is the patient fully describing their symptoms and their history. So I think that's a critical part of this. And I don't hear much talk about that. I'm sure they're looking at that, but I think that's critical. The other part is I once had something wrong, a vascular thing with something in my forehead. I don't really understand to this day what it was, but I went to 4 different doctors, and it was classic blind man and the elephant. Well, I'm a trunk doctor, and so this must be the trunk. I'm a tail doctor, and this must be the tail. Right? And they each only looked in their narrow view. So that's where I see the most benefit to this is, hello, bozos, you didn't think about this. You didn't think about that. And, I think there is real benefit, but again, it depends on how well the system works with the doctors. And doctors being doctors and being egotists, just like journalists, my fear is they're going to be resistant. And so how you get them to work with this in a collaborative way where they're not embarrassed and they can take credit for the eureka. Oh, of course, it's this. They have these stories all the time in the Washington Post. They do this. You got to read through 30 inches of type before you finally get to discovering what the ailment was. But, there are mysterious things. And we see these stories all the time where somebody didn't think of one factor. They couldn't figure out what it was. It's Dr. House on the TV show. My family loved that show, where he was the brilliant diagnostician. So I think this can be very helpful, but it needs the human angle on the input and the output. So.
Yep, indeed. Humans always got to be involved. Solomon is apparently all gaga over superintelligence as well, because it's the next thing. He says, this orchestration mechanism, multiple agents that work together in this chain of debate style, that's what's going to drive us closer to medical superintelligence. So they're all gaga over superintelligence, apparently. Agents, that's so yesterday.
Last week.
I came across an article by our friend Harry McCracken at Fast Company, who highlighted a recent study conducted by MIT's Media Lab that studied participants as they wrote essays on topics from SAT questions. There were three groups. One group writing independently, one group writing with the assistance of search engines, and one group writing with, you guessed it, ChatGPT assistance. And brain activity was captured during that process to kind of track like what's going on throughout this process in the brain, what's lighting up, what can they find? Well, they found that while ChatGPT makes the writing process easier, the study found that it negatively impacts the user's long-term critical thinking skills. They say, quote, by simplifying the process of obtaining answers, LLMs could decrease student motivation to perform independent research and generate solutions. Lack of mental stimulation could lead to a decrease in cognitive development and negatively impact memory. That's the quote from the report. And McCracken, used this article to kind of analyze his own use of AI and kind of ponder if his own mental acuity was withering away without him even knowing by using and relying on some of these tools. But he did ultimately calm down in the piece. And, he says, I recognize AI as a great starting point, not the best solution tool. And I think that's kind of part of the point here. If students are, choosing to or lacking the motivation to perform independent research, well, that's kind of on them, right? Like that's on how you use the tool. Don't use the tool and take the output wholesale and be like, my work is done, as we say time and time again. But if you're just taking it that way, that's kind of on you. I don't know that that's on your reliance on the thing. You're just relying a little too heavily on the thing and not doing the other part that's essential and important.
I'm reminded when we had Lev Manovich on the show, an artist and digital humanities expert from City University of New York, and he found that when AI was most useful, it was when he thought it was wrong. And an example I gave earlier in the show about going through something with Gemini, deep research. I always have to say it that way. Deep research. Deep. What's most useful to me is when I argue with it. I'm poking with it. I'm saying, well, I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe that's just my ego. Maybe it's like I'm a doctor and I'm saying, no, they don't have appendicitis because I didn't think he had appendicitis. Maybe that's just me being a jerk. Or maybe it's a useful tool. And Matthew Kirschenbaum, my friend at the University of Maryland, soon University of Virginia, who was on the Modern Language Association task force on how to use AI in the classroom, comes up with brilliant assignments to the students to make them interact with the AI. So I think there is a lot to be done there. The problem with saying that anything changes the brain, I think, is BS. Or that it's way too soon to say there's a long-term impact in here. What was your definition of long-term? ChatGPT's only been around for 2 years, and the study is only this old, so you can't know what long-term is.
Yeah.
I keep on calling upon you for this as the present-day dad.
Yeah.
How much do your daughters have to write essays for school versus your memory of your time in school?
Well, it's hard because my older daughter, she's only just now a sophomore. Like she'll be, when she returns to school, she's a sophomore. So I guess she's really kind of in the point to where she would write essays. How often does it happen? And my younger daughter, she's going into 7th grade, so she's not writing as many essays necessarily where she's at right now. It's a really great question because my older daughter, she's so self-sufficient. So often it's just kind of like she's
you don't know what
she's taking care of. She's doing.
Well,
I check in with it and stuff, and I know that she does, but I just know that she doesn't have a huge problem with it either. She's pretty self-directed on it.
So
and pretty capable.
You grew up in a time when you certainly did have to do a lot of essays for school, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But when I think about sure, there were essays, but I'm trying to think about like the frequency and how that compares to now, and I would have a really hard time guessing that.
So what I'm trying to get to is whether it is in fact as valuable a teaching and cognition tool as we think it is. Do you think you got out a lot out of writing an essay? I mean, I'm a writer, so yeah. Right.
Yeah.
You are too, but you don't do it so much for the printed page as much.
No.
You think, you research.
I mean, I do more now, but yeah, totally.
So do you think that the essay is a critical tool and we're losing something mighty here, or do you think that it was kind of outmoded maybe?
I don't know. It's a good question because I think I'm again reminded. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the comment from Alex Hanna about kind of research, and when you're researching to write something, the fun is in the exploration and the journey that takes you. And I think the process of writing an essay, let's say, involves a lot of discovery. And maybe the writing down on a page isn't the most important part. It's kind of coordinating and organizing all of these disparate pieces of information into a cohesive thing. That's the most important part, and the essay is like the proof of that.
Yeah.
I think there's still value to that for sure.
Yeah.
I think the risk is when you use these things, it's very, as you well know, it's very easy to say, this is what I'm working on, give me something, and it gives you something, and you immediately, the potential is that you immediately just kind of check out and be like, well, I have to, why do I need to go further? I already have this. And my hunch is that you do lose something in that it's less, it leaves less of an imprint. I'm not knowing how deep of an imprint it leaves comparatively, but I do feel for myself that if I just do that, I care a lot less about what's on the page versus if I spend my time doing it. And I think when I care more about it, I probably retain more, but that's just a guess.
Yeah,
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I'm trying to think. So in this episode that I talked about at the beginning, I had already started thinking through something, and I had started research in an idea, and I had a whiteboard with topics on it. So I had something begun, right? It wasn't. I don't think I'd want to do it at the very beginning of an idea, but then
Right.
I challenged Gemini with that idea, and it came back with stuff that was okay, but it wasn't so brilliant that I said, "Oh shit, I wish I thought of that."
Yeah, right.
It might have slightly different ways to say it. It might give me another path to investigate, but it wasn't so brilliant. So I think what we need, oddly, I think what we need to instill in our students is some level of confidence and self-assurance and self-assertiveness with their own intellectual abilities. That they can argue with the AI. They can edit the AI. They can say the AI is not good enough, or it left out this, or it left out that. And then, because one of the best ways to learn is to teach. And can you teach the AI? Oddly,
That's super interesting that you bring that up, because what that kind of brings to mind for me is, in order to have that confidence, like we are in a moment right now with AI where it's easy to look at these tools and we, again, this is a topic that comes up all the time. It's easy to look at these tools and feel very downtrodden about the fact that, oh, well, these tools can do all the things that I spent, like doctors, right? Doctors, great example. I spent my life becoming an expert on this thing. And now there's this tool that a lot of people believe can give them just the same type of advice and everything. And so we're kind of in a point right now with students, especially, and I'm finally getting to my point, with students where, I would hate for tools like this existing to be a demotivator for them to be like, I wanted to go to school because I wanted to learn about this thing because I saw a future in this pathway. And now we've got these tools that promise to do all these things. Why bother? Why even try? Like, what does this mean about the future? And I think the real kind of extension of that, from how we get this to be a positive outlook, a positive story, is that these students do need to know that these tools exist, how to use them, so that they can, again, use them in a supportive way for what they're doing and not as a replacement.
I agree.
Yeah.
And how to set them up that they feel confident enough to do that, that it can't just sway them into laziness.
Yeah. Right. Oh, totally. Because
I
bet you a lot of students,
than that.
I bet a lot of students, get kind of have the security of that laziness. When they're presented with a paper, they put in a prompt, they get a paper. That's not the end of the story, right? Like, that might be give you some ideas of places you can go, but man, it's so tempting when it's just there and done.
Especially if you don't care about the class or don't care about the assignment. It's
totally. And as a teacher, it's got to suck to be on the receiving end of that, to be like, ugh, I see the AI gloss once again. Yeah, no good. Yeah, it's interesting time. Speaking of interesting time,
Here's
before
your
we
favorite story of the day.
Oh, I know. I love these stories. Music, creativity, AI, it's got everything. The Velvet Sundown
That sounds like a
sounds
good name for a band.
yeah, an indie rock band, doesn't it? By all accounts. This is a band that you can go onto any of the music services and you can find their music or its music or whatever you want to call it. By all accounts, let's just be real. This seems to be the creation of AI, and that's why it's getting a lot of press right now. The press photos have a total kind of like AI generated gloss to them. All of them kind of have similar characters, but there's just something kind of off about it. On June 26th, they had 300 at the time of the writing of this article on Music Ally. They had 325,000 Spotify listeners monthly. As of today, I checked, that sits around 634,000. So there's a big kind of like, I don't know if it's a meme-ish draw to their music or if it's a legitimate, like, I love their music, I'm listening to it a lot. It's probably a little bit of both, but I think a large part of the attention right now is because everybody's scratching their head trying to figure out, like, okay, like this music's getting a lot of action, but man, there's something about how it sounds. There's something about how it looks. People are really questioning, is this an actual band? They included a Billboard quote in their bio, which seems to be non-existent outside of the quote that they included in their bio. If you search for the band members, that comes up empty. Deezer, which is a music service, has AI detecting algorithms that identify the band's music as AI generated, at least in some cases. So in the face of all of this, the band is claiming we never use AI. They actually, took to their Twitter account, and you can even see it in their kind of like their profile summary. Yes, we are a real band and we never use AI. Hashtag never AI. And calling out so-called, quote, journalists who keep pushing the lazy, baseless theory that the Velvet Sundown is AI generated with zero evidence. So really coming out strong saying, you're wrong, we are real. They do mention in this thread, by the way, that they locked down their personal accounts due to harassment. so they're making the claim strongly.
Don't be mean to us.
That they
We're
are
just
real.
AI.
And yeah, it's just kind of interesting.
So Mr. Musician,
yeah.
you listen to their music. What do you think?
If I had to make a guess, I would say that it's AI. I hear that kind of, and I don't want to denigrate them. If they are a real band, like, and I'll get to my point in a second, which I think kind of confirms this. But if they are a real band, I'm sorry for saying this, because I know if I made real music and then everybody was absolutely positive that it was AI generated, I'd be kind of pissed. But when I listen to it, I hear a lot of the tells. I hear that kind of like washy quality of the high frequency information, symbols and stuff. There's a certain kind of, same with images. There's a certain gloss that AI music just kind of has. And if you know what you're listening for, it makes it a lot more possible to identify that is, there's something about the lyrical structure that just sounds a little too generated from my experience playing around. But my point outside of all of this is whether it's AI generated or whether it's not, who cares? I don't care. I don't care if it's AI generated. If someone likes the music, that's what I care about.
So what do you think of the music? What, on a quality basis?
I mean, I've listened to a couple of songs. I think, again, this, I guess, probably gets back to my own biases. If this music was recorded and performed by what I believe to be like an actual band in a room and had a little bit of those imperfections that come along with that and kind of a higher quality to the sound and everything, I mean, I'd say their songs are pretty good. They're not horrible. There's something there. I listened to one of their songs and then I took the dogs for a walk and I found myself with that song going in my head. So, like at the end of the day, like, doesn't matter.
Right.
Doesn't matter. And to some people it does. To some people, just knowing the fact that they might be AI generated is enough for them to give them the middle finger and be like, screw you. And I don't know. I look at that and I'm like, that's kind of silly. Like, really, at the end of the day, if you like it, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, I don't use Spotify. How much is Spotify all about recommendations?
Oh, recommend. I don't know that I necessarily noticed
I mean, does
recommendations when I use
does
Spotify.
traffic beget traffic on Spotify?
There are certain lists, like playlists, like a Discover list, which I think that this band, the Velvet Sundown, was on a Discover playlist of some sort. And I think some of that is AI generated, some of it's manually curated, but it's kind of like a regularly updated playlist that if you launch Spotify for the day, it's like, oh, here's a bunch of songs that Spotify thinks I would want to discover. It's right there in the name. And I think they made that Discover playlist. And so, that's probably part of the reason why they're getting a lot of attention. But, even if they are AI generated, they're good enough to have caught some steam.
Yeah.
And I guess my greater point is whether they are or they aren't, there will be music that is fully AI generated at some point that will get all the all the traction that we currently praise human performers for. Like it or not, it's just going to happen. At some point it's going to happen. And I don't know, at the end of the day, like, did you like it? Did you find yourself singing it to yourself? Like, you could say what you want about kind of how you feel about the ethics around it, and I totally appreciate and respect that. But when it comes to like music, you either like it or you don't. No matter how it was created,
Yeah, I can't find it right now. I was looking through if I could see somewhere on the socials. I re-socialed somebody's meme, and it was clearly made up on AI, but they used the AI tool to come up with something that I thought was funny. And somebody came back and said, AI slop. I said, but it's a joke. It made me laugh. It's okay, right? Let it go. That's the one end of it. Is that I think that's your point. If you kind of like it, what's the problem?
Right.
Right. If you didn't use a brush and a palette, but you used a camera, what's the problem?
Right.
Right.
Totally.
The other hand is that it's making me more suspicious of more images and more video and more sound, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that's a bad thing, or maybe it is. Everybody's fearing that everybody's believing what's on social media, when in fact every survey says people don't believe social media. So in fact, what social media did was make us more skeptical. Dana Boyd argues that media literacy backfired because we taught our young people to be suspicious of everything, including the things their parents tell them. And so they're just universally suspicious now. So is that good or is that bad? I don't know. I don't know.
Can be good, can be bad.
Yeah.
Depends on the context. Anyways, I have you will be happy to know I have reached out to the band and invited them on the show.
Excellent. Come on, prove your humanity.
We'll see. I mean, and it's not even about that. It's like whether it is an AI project, because this could be a whole social experiment, right? And if so, it's working, it's getting people recognizing and talking. Whether it is or whether it's an actual band, I think the conversation would be awesome.
It's just great.
Which
and
it's
even
very
if it's,
telling of right now in creativity,
even if it's 4 people acting like they're the band,
Yeah.
that'd be great. And
Let's
how
do it.
appropriate that this weekend out comes the 41st anniversary edition of This is Spinal Tap.
Yeah, right? No kidding.
And Rob Reiner was on MSNBC earlier today on Morning Joe talking with John Heilemann, and he said that at the time the photography director said, "This is what real bands are like. How is this funny?" Right, right. And Reiner said, "No, it's just that much off. It's just that much,
just
right? Just
a
little bit off." And that's what makes it a great parody.
Yes.
So come on, Sunset Sunrise, whoever
Velvet
you are or
Sundown.
aren't, come on, join us.
Join us. Let's talk. We would love that.
There we
All
go.
right, real quick, if you're enjoying this show and you want to see us interview more potentially fake but potentially real bands like this, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's a huge help. We're getting lots of reviews, and I appreciate it, but we could always use more. So thank you for that. Take a quick break, come back, talk a little bit about an interview that we have coming up this weekend, and play a little clip. That's coming up in a sec. All right, just last Friday, you and I sat down, virtually, of course, with an interview with Rishad Tobaccowala, who is the author of a new book, Rethinking Work. But Jeff, you know Rishad. You seem to go way back. Tell me a little bit about
So
him.
Rishad is a brilliant ad man. He was the chief strategy officer for Publicis, which is a giant agency that's based in Paris. And he's extremely strategic. I interviewed him for What Would Google Do way back in the day. He was an advisor to a startup I was on, may it rest in peace, called Daylife. He's a brilliant guy, and no one would ever accuse him of being a man of few words. I've long said he's the most quotable person in media. And so we talked to him after on this show 3 weeks ago. We talked about how Meta was going to basically hand over everything in advertising, creative and media, to AI. I said, we got to keep investigating this. So that's why we chose to have Rishad on.
Indeed, and it was a wonderful conversation. He's got a lot to say. You're gonna really enjoy the conversation when we do release the interview. Probably this Saturday. I'm guessing it'll get out Saturday, maybe Sunday.
It's a holiday week, so give him a break. If it's Sunday, Saturday, it's okay.
Normally I would turn this around, like do all the work on Friday and everything, but I'm floating the river with the family for July 4th, so it might have to be delayed. But anyways, I do have a clip here, a question that you asked, Jeff, that talks about VO3 and video generation tools, how far they've come, and the impact that those are already having, but potentially will have on the ad industry going forward.
Finals, I think we saw the first supposedly AI created ad. VO3 is pretty impressive now.
Very impressive.
You're down to just 5 fingers instead of 8 or 9.
Yeah.
The strategizing aside and the data aside, just simply the media creation. Do you think we're going to see, and also aside the issues of rights and fears of lawyers?
Yeah.
Put that aside for now too. Not easy to do. But do you think we're going to see a lot of advertising, especially on TV, including primetime TV, whatever the hell that is now, that's going to be fully created out of these AI tools rather than old ways?
I would say that most advertising in 2 to 3 years from now will be 80 to 90% primarily AI tools with, human layer. And
not saying that the people in them will be AI generated, but AI tools are involved in some way or fully generated.
It could also be AI people and everything else, but it'll be human beings working with those tools, right? And the reason is the rapid advances in those tools. So VO3 is absolutely amazing. So you can sort of imagine VO4 will be even better, right, to a great extent. But one of the biggest things, and this is also, by the way, a challenge for all companies. So in my book, I'm very hopeful about the future, but I have 3 lines which get people all worked up. So I said, what we're going to be seeing now is a great decline in jobs, but a rise of work. And I said, the big mistake people have made is they've associated work and jobs. I stopped having a job 6 years ago. I have lots of work, right? And if you go back all the way to when Jeff and I were young, in agricultural age and all of that, we used to just work from home. We had work. We never had jobs. Okay. So that's number one, if you think about it. Second is most of these technologies will create an ecosystem of many, most companies will be much smaller than they are today. Much smaller. You've seen peak Microsoft, peak Google, peak in employees, but not revenue or profitability. However, there'll be many more jobs, or not jobs word bird, because there'll be many more companies. In the US, 6 million companies were launched last year, right? Because of the modern technologies. And what I believe that AI is going to be doing creatively is going to be democratizing a whole bunch of stuff. So these things that you couldn't do, just like YouTube and blogs, it allowed people like Jeff. I mean, in the previous time for Jeff needed to do stuff, he had to launch Entertainment Weekly, which isn't so cheap. Yeah. And then he could do Buzz Machine, right? So, and both have a role, but you're sort of seeing. So that's the key thing. So I truly believe that there's going to be a massive new world of creativity. But if you think about human expression with these tools, I always remind people that Gary Kasparov was beaten by Deep Blue. But what people don't realize is the sequel. Gary Kasparov and Deep Blue always beat Deep Blue. Right? But on the other hand, in some cases, the human will be completely replaced. So yesterday, I put a cartoon on into LinkedIn, which sort of got people all worked up. And basically, it is a farmer telling a horse, right? The tractor will not replace you, right? You, the horse. The horse using a tractor will be the one replacing the horse. That's what people say. In some cases, the human is going to be replaced. Okay, and just get used to it. And anybody who tells you differently doesn't understand where this technology is going.
Interesting stuff. Definitely check out the full interview this weekend at some point. Yeah, it was great to get his perspective on how these tools are really influencing the ad kind of ecosystem, the advertising ecosystem. But as a whole, I mean, he's really well spoken. He's obviously given some of these talks before. I can envision him on stage.
He comes up with one line there. You think that's a great line. He knows it's a line, and he knows it gets quoted. And he's an ad guy. Yeah. So what do you expect? It's
he's great at it. Yeah. Totally. He's great at marketing himself during the conversation.
He's charming and brilliant and a lot of fun to watch.
Indeed. That's coming sometime this weekend. But we have reached the end of this episode. And once again, thank you, Jeff. You mentioned real quick, jeffjarvis.com, by the way, is where everybody should go to check out your work. For some reason, I cannot pull that up. I don't know why it's not. Let's see here. Oh, there we go. You mentioned that you submitted your book, Hot Type.
Hot Type, the next one about a cultural history of the linotype. So now it's got to go through academic review and it's got to go through editing and publishing. So I don't know when it'll be out exactly. And they're still working on the cover, but I'm delighted that I'm dying to have somebody read it and tell me what they think.
Nice.
How long does that process? Oh, it can be 6 months. I sent it to two people who are in the book and are quoted because they're experts. I didn't want to screw anything up, and I screwed up the affiliation of one of them. So I'm already embarrassed as hell. It would have gotten caught, but not a good start.
Yeah. Oh, well, for whatever reason, take it for what you will. That gives me a little hope because I screw things up all the time. And so it's nice to know that I'm not the only one.
I did earlier in this episode. I'm still embarrassed. I messed up Microsoft and Meta, so I apologize, folks.
Oh, good. See, we're human. We are not AI.
That's for sure.
But we do have one thing in common with AI. We get things wrong, too. The Web We Weave, the Gutenberg parenthesis, and magazine can all be found at jeffjarvis.com. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Great stuff. AIinside.show is the show page where you get all the show notes, all the links to the stories we talk about, subscribe links, all the reviews that you're leaving end up there in one way, shape, or form. It'd be cool to get a July one in there. Just saying. I'll just keep saying,
folks.
And then finally, patreon.com/AI Inside Show is where you can go to throw your support behind the show, become an executive producer, even if you want to go that far. We've got a lot. Dr. Do, Jeffrey Maricini, WPVM 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina. Dante St. James, Bono Day Rick, Jason Neiffer, Jason Brady, and Anthony Downs, our amazing executive producers each and every week. Thank you so much for doing what you do. Thank you for supporting this show and enabling us to do it week in and week out. But that's it. Make sure and check your feed this weekend for the interview with Rishad
Tobaccowala.
Rishad Tobaccowala. And we'll see you next time on another episode of AI Inside. Bye, everybody.